On a quiet August evening along the mountainous shores of Lake Champlain, the air hangs warm and still, as if the world itself has decided to rest. A cluster of cedar cabins sits tucked into the trees at Cold Spring, where families gather each summer to escape everything they think matters. Inside one of those cabins, we find young Ethan, a thoughtful teenage boy with sharp eyes and a quiet way of listening, sitting at a wooden table under the soft yellow glow of electric light. Across from him is young Lucy, a bright and curious girl, her laughter easy, her presence steady, the kind of person who makes the world feel smaller and safer just by being there. At the head of the table sits Ethan's father, a man worn just enough by life to notice when things begin to slip. His voice carries the weight of memory as he speaks about the lake, about how it used to be clearer, quieter, better. Beside him, Ethan's mother moves about the room with a practiced calm, keeping things together the way mothers do when everything still makes sense. Outside, the lake is glass, the sky is clear. Somewhere far above, an airliner hums across the horizon, late enough to be noticed, ordinary enough to be ignored. And then, without warning, the light flickers. The power goes out with a soft click, followed almost immediately by a distant roll of thunder that doesn't belong to the clear sky they had just been admiring. For a moment, no one moves. Ethan's father raises his hand in a small, almost sarcastic gesture, as if to say, "There it is," though, in the sudden darkness, no one can really see it. They wait for the lights to return. They don't. Ethan's mother fumbles through a drawer and produces novelty oil lamps, decorative things that had never been used. There's a brief, awkward argument about the wick, about how high it should go, about whether they even have oil in them at all. Eventually, a flame catches, and the room fills with a dim, uneven glow. It should feel comforting. It doesn't. Young Ethan reaches for a flashlight and clicks it on. Nothing. He tries another. Still nothing. The batteries were new, he says. That's weird. The words hang in the air longer than they should. Phones are checked out of habit, not expectation. No signal. That part is normal here. Cold Spring has never had cell service, but the Wi-Fi should be working. It isn't. Not slow, not disconnected, just gone. And then, one by one, they all fade to black. The batteries are dead. They step outside, oil lamp in hand, the darkness pressing in closer than it should. The trees feel taller. The lake feels farther away. Across the camp, other cabins are beginning to glow with the same flickering lamplight. Voices carry through the night, low and uncertain. Ethan and his father walk down to the car. The door opens with a hollow sound. He turns the key. Nothing, not even a click. They look at each other, neither willing to say what they're thinking. Back inside, the temperature begins to drop. As night settles in, the gas heater is lit, and it works reliably, stubbornly, like it belongs to a different world entirely. That becomes the first small comfort. Something still works. Morning comes slowly. There is no electricity, no engines, no distant hum of anything at all. Families gather on porches, eating what they can, speaking in low voices that drift toward the water. Eventually, they converge on the dock beach, drawn together by the need to confirm what each of them already suspects. Everyone is experiencing the same thing. No one has an explanation. They decide to wait just a day, just until things come back. That night, the illusion finally breaks. Across the lake, far beyond the dark water, the horizon begins to glow. Not with lights, with fire. A dull orange burn spreads along the distant shoreline, rising and falling in uneven pulses, like something alive and struggling. Someone points out that there have been no headlights on the bridge. Not all day, not once. Grand Isle, just across the water, sits in complete and unnatural silence. No movement, no light, no sound. Days pass, then a week. The camp settles into something almost peaceful. Fishing, swimming, cooking over open flame. The children adapt first, as they always do. They play in the water, drift on rafts, nap in the sun, wrapped in beach towels, as if nothing has changed at all. The adults know better. They hold a cookout on the dock beach, the largest gathering since the lights went out. Food is shared, plans are made, or at least attempted. Some want to stay, some want to leave. The idea that this might not be temporary begins to creep into every conversation, whether spoken or not. The Donaldson family prepares their large sailboat, heavily supplied, quietly armed. Mr. Donaldson pulls young Ethan aside and places a .22 pistol in his hands, showing him how to use it with a calm that feels out of place. The Halsey family plans a short trip to Grand Isle. They say they'll be back the next day. They never return. Another family sets out north toward St. Albans. Others choose to remain behind, unwilling to trade uncertainty for danger. Among them, an older man with a canoe strapped to the roof of his car casually suggests he might row along the coast and check on neighboring camps. No one stops him. He is never seen again. Young Ethan stands with young Lucy at the edge of the water, watching as the sailboats disappear into the distance. There are no goodbyes, not real ones, just assumptions. The decision is made. Young Ethan, young Lucy, Ethan's parents, and a small group of others will leave on foot, heading over the mountain toward Milton, and from there to Allen, home. Because whatever this is, it has to be easier there. As they pack what little they can carry, the camp behind them settles into a strange, quiet stillness. No engines, no radios, no distant cities humming on the horizon. Just wind, water, and the faint smell of smoke drifting from somewhere far across the lake. The Bolton family would never see Cold Spring again. The mountains rise quietly above the valley, wrapped in early morning mist, as a small group moves along a narrow trail carved between trees that have stood longer than memory. The world is still, but not peaceful. Not anymore. At the front of the group walks young Ethan, his expression sharper now, more alert than it was just days before. A small pack slung over his shoulders and something heavier behind his eyes. Beside him is young Lucy, steady and watchful, her calm no longer effortless, but chosen. Behind them, Ethan's father moves with purpose, scanning the tree line with the instincts of a man who has begun to understand that the rules have changed. Ethan's mother stays close, carrying what she can, holding the group together in quieter ways. Around them, a handful of other young people follow, restless, uncertain, already strained by something they don't yet have words for. Above the trees, the sky is clear again. No planes pass overhead. The first day of walking feels almost like a hike. The air is cool, the forest alive with sound, and for a few brief hours, it is possible to pretend that this is temporary. That somewhere ahead, a road will lead to a working town, to lights, to engines, to answers. But the deeper they move into the mountains, the more the silence begins to settle in. No distant traffic, No aircraft, no hum of anything built by man. Only wind, water, and the sound of their own footsteps. They stop at the old sugar mill by late afternoon. The structure sits abandoned at the edge of a clearing, its weathered beams leaning just enough to suggest that time has been winning for a long while. It offers shelter, and that is enough. That evening, Ethan's father unwraps the .22 pistol. He doesn't make a ceremony of it. He simply hands it to young Ethan and shows him how to hold it properly, how to steady his hands, how to aim without thinking too much about it. Young Lucy watches closely. When it's her turn, she handles it with surprising confidence. There is no excitement in it, only understanding. The others react differently. Some look away, some laugh nervously. One of them mutters something about how unnecessary it is. Another says nothing at all, but keeps their distance. For the first time, a quiet division forms. Not spoken, not acknowledged, but felt. Young Ethan notices. He doesn't comment. Later, as the light fades, they sit together in uneasy silence. A few of the others, heavily altered in ways that feel strangely out of place now, whisper among themselves, casting occasional glances toward the pistol resting near Ethan's pack. Whatever world they came from, it isn't this one anymore. They move again at first light. The second day is harder. The trail becomes less certain, the terrain steeper, the weight of their supplies more noticeable with every mile. Hunger sharpens, fatigue settles in. By the time they reach the outskirts of Milton, no one is pretending anymore. The town is not empty, not exactly. The general store stands open, its shelves stripped of anything useful. The liquor store next door has been picked over just as thoroughly, though a few scattered items remain, things overlooked or abandoned in haste. They gather what they can. No one speaks about it as looting, but no one pretends it isn't either. As they move through the quiet streets, something becomes clear. They are being watched. Curtains shift. Shadows move behind glass. Faces, just barely visible, pull back the moment they are noticed. People are still here. They're just hiding. No one approaches them. No one calls out. And no one offers help. They don't stay long. There is nothing here for them. Not anymore. By late afternoon, they reach the hillside road where Ethan's grandparents' home stands. Or rather, stood. The house has been broken into, doors forced open, drawers overturned. The careful order of a lived-in home, replaced by the scattered remains of people, searching for anything that might keep them alive just a little longer. There is no sign of his grandparents, no note, no trace. Young Ethan stands in the doorway for a long moment, not moving. Young Lucy stays beside him. Neither of them says anything. Inside, the others begin to search. Pantries are opened. Supplies are gathered. The quiet line between survival and violation blurs further. Young Ethan watches for a moment, then turns away. He and young Lucy sit together in the living room, sharing a bottle of club soda and a box of stale pumpernickel crackers, as if holding on to something small and ordinary might still matter. Around them, the house continues to be taken apart. In the guest bedroom, Ethan's father opens a closet and begins pulling down blankets, pillows, old board games, things that seem harmless, even thoughtful. Ethan's mother brings them into the living room for the others, trying to restore some sense of comfort. But in the back of the closet, something else waits. Carefully, quietly, Ethan's father reaches behind the stacked items and pulls down 2 long cases. Inside them, shotguns, 1 pump action, 1 semi-automatic, wrapped, preserved, forgotten, until now. There is a moment, just a flicker, of something like relief on his face, followed quickly by control. He finds a box, opens it. Shells, old, but sealed. Probably still good. Young Ethan appears in the doorway just in time to see it. No words are exchanged. None are needed. Found an old shotgun. Couple shells. It doesn't matter. That night, they secure the house. Doors barricaded, windows covered. Everyone arms themselves with whatever they can find. Kitchen knives, hammers, tools meant for building, now repurposed for something else. Young Ethan, young Lucy, and Ethan's father take watch. The pistol rests in Ethan's lap. The shotgun leans within reach. The house is silent, but not empty. Ethan's father keeps the backpack close. Closer than necessary. Inside it, carefully packed and hidden. Shells, supplies, pieces of a future he no longer believes will be simple. Outside, the night stretches endlessly across the hills. No lights, no engines, no distant cities, only the quiet realization that whatever happened at Cold Spring was not the beginning, and whatever comes next will not be temporary. The valley opens beneath a pale morning sky, wide and green and impossibly calm, as if nothing terrible has ever happened here, and nothing ever could. Nestled within that valley lies the town of Allen, small and quiet, surrounded by rolling mountains that stretch outward in every direction, fading into a hazy horizon that feels both protective and isolating. At the edge of town, standing near the river as it rushes past, with steady, unbothered purpose, is old Ethan, his hair now gray, his face lined by years that have carried more weight than most. His eyes are calm, but not soft. They have seen too much for that. Not far from him is Ethan Jr., a strong, capable man in the middle of his life, moving with the confidence of someone who has never known the old world the way his father did, but understands its absence all the same. In the distance, children move through the fields. Mary, Joseph, Daniel, and Matthew, laughing, chasing one another through tall grass that bends gently in the wind, and watching over all of it, in ways both seen and unseen, is the memory of young Lucy, whose presence still lingers in the spaces between what was and what remains. The town is alive, but it was not always this way. There was a time when the world simply stopped, not slowly, not gradually, but all at once. They would come to call it the bad time. Old Ethan stands before a small group of children inside a modest church, his voice steady, measured, the way a man speaks when he has told a story too many times and still hasn't found a way to make it easier. He does not begin with fear. He begins with facts. Everything stopped working. Lights, engines, planes, cities. He tells them about that night, about the darkness, about the silence, about how, for a brief moment, everyone believed it would come back. It didn't. In the days that followed, confusion turned into fear, and fear turned into something else. The cities were the first to fall, cut off from power, from supply, from structure. They consumed what they had, and then turned on each other when there was nothing left. Food vanished, water became uncertain, and the people, millions of them, had nowhere to go. Suburbs lasted a little longer, long enough to be emptied, long enough to be looted, long enough to be stripped of anything that could be carried. And then they fell too. Those who fled into the countryside believed they might find safety there. Some did, most didn't. Small towns like Allen closed themselves off, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. There were watchtowers, barricades, men and women with rifles who had made a decision that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Some people were allowed in, family, friends, those who could offer something in return. Most were turned away. Old Ethan pauses, not because he has forgotten what comes next, but because he remembers it too clearly. There were acts of kindness, he says finally, more than you might think. Food shared, shelter given, strangers taken in. But for every one of those stories, there were others. Stories that no one tells anymore. Stories that no one wants to remember. Outside, the town of Allen moves through its day with quiet purpose. The farmer's market stands at the center of everything. A wide, trampled field filled with stalls and voices, and the steady exchange of goods that keeps the town alive. In the warmer months, it overflows with life. Maple syrup, preserved fruits, poultry, dairy, fish pulled fresh from the river. In winter, it becomes something else entirely. A park, a place of gathering, a place where people remind themselves that survival is not the same thing as living. The churches stand nearby, one Catholic, one Protestant, both full, not because everyone believes the same things, but because everyone believes in something. The library sits just off the square, its shelves mostly empty, its caretakers slowly, patiently, rebuilding a collection from whatever fragments of the old world can still be found. Books that survived, books that were carried, books that were saved. Some of them are not quite right. Old Ethan stands now in that library, turning the pages of a worn book with careful hands. He pauses on a passage, frowns, not because he doesn't understand it, but because he does. Jesus,
Liar.
He mutters quietly. I remember this stuff. Across the room, Zion flips through another book, his brow tightening. What are you looking at? Someone asks. History. Our history? Zion shakes his head slowly. Not mine. He closes the book. I don't know whose history this is. Outside, life continues. Holly moves through the edge of town with a small crate in her hands, inside of which a litter of young cats shifts and mews. Softly, she handles them with care, with familiarity. They are valuable now, for farms, for homes, for children who have never known dogs. Her brothers work nearby, Mason and Joshua among them, strong, capable, already stepping into roles that will define their lives. The younger children follow where they can, learning simply by being present, and always, quietly, constantly. There are the sentries, men like Caleb and Zion, watching the roads, watching the tree lines, watching for anything that does not belong. Because even now, after all this time, there are still things out there, things that did not end when the world did. That night, old Ethan sits alone by the river. The sound of the water is steady, unchanging. Ethan Jr. approaches, stopping a few steps away. For a while, neither of them speaks. You told them everything? Ethan Jr. finally asks. Old Ethan shakes his head. No. Another pause. You ever going to? Old Ethan looks out across the dark water, his expression unreadable. I don't know. The river moves on, as it always has, as it always will. Behind them, the town of Allen settles into sleep, safe for now, and far beyond the mountains. beyond the roads no one travels anymore, beyond the places where maps no longer matter. The world is still out there, waiting. Morning settles gently over the town of Allen, the light soft and golden as it spills across fields, rooftops, and the narrow roads that wind their way in and out of the valley. Standing near the edge of town, where the eastern road disappears into the mountains, is Ethan Jr., steady and watchful, his posture relaxed but never careless. He is a man shaped by a world that taught him early that safety is something you build, not something you assume. Not far from him, old Ethan moves slowly along the path, a book tucked under his arm, his pace unhurried, his thoughts somewhere between memory and responsibility. In the town square, Holly tends carefully to a small crate of cats, her hands gentle, her focus quiet but unwavering, while her brothers, Mason and Joshua, move with purpose nearby, already carrying the weight of work that never really ends. At the edge of the square, two men stand apart from the crowd. Caleb, strong and grounded, his presence calm but firm, and Zion, sharper, more watchful, his eyes constantly scanning, as if the world has already proven itself untrustworthy. A little further back, leaning casually against the doorway of a small general store, is Tony, easy in his posture, approachable in his smile, and just a little too comfortable for a man who has seen as much as he claims, and watching all of them. From a quiet place, just beyond the movement of the town, is Kennedy, ancient, composed, her gaze steady in a way that suggests she is not observing the present, but measuring it. The town wakes early, not because it has to, but because it always has. At first light, the sentries gather. They call it breakfast, but it is more than that. Inside Caleb's restaurant, the air is warm with the smell of cooking food and quiet conversation. Plates are filled, coffee is poured, and the men and women who keep watch over Allen begin their day together. Caleb moves through the room with ease, setting plates down without needing to be asked. Zion sits near the window, already watching the road. They speak in low voices, not secrets, not exactly, but nothing that needs to be said too loudly. East road's clear, west too. Rivers running high, good for us. Small updates, constant awareness. Ethan Jr. sits among them, listening more than speaking. Old Ethan joins later, slower, quieter, taking a seat without interrupting the flow. At the head of the table sits a man who seems, at first glance, out of place. Mayor Joe, Pastor Joe, Judge Burns, the same man, 3 roles, all necessary. He eats with the others, laughs when appropriate, listens when it matters. There is no ceremony to his authority, only acceptance. Beside him sits Father Philip Phipps, who nods along to most things, occasionally offering a thought, but more often deferring to Mayor Joe with quiet agreement. This is how Allen governs itself. Not perfectly, but well enough. After breakfast, the sentries disperse, some to the roads, some to the outskirts, some simply remain present, visible, because presence is often enough. In the town square, the day unfolds. Holly moves from one small group of farmers to another, carefully negotiating trades. A cat for grain, a pair for tools. Always fair, always measured. She knows the value of what she carries. Nearby, Mason and Joshua work with a group of men repairing a wagon wheel. Their movements efficient, practiced. They speak little, but when they do, others listen. They are becoming something more than laborers, something closer to builders. Across the square, Tony's general store does steady business. He greets everyone by name, remembers what they need, keeps track of what they owe without ever writing it down. Police officer, he once claimed. No one has ever asked him to prove it. And yet, Caleb and Zion occasionally exchange a look when Tony isn't watching. Not suspicion, not exactly recognition. At the edge of town, Juan works with a small group of young adults, teaching them how to handle weapons. Not aggressively, not recklessly, but with discipline, with control. Don't point it unless you mean it. Don't fire it unless you have to. And if you have to, don't hesitate. His voice is calm, his instruction precise. The young people listen, some more seriously than others. Among them, Bobby Phipps leans a little too casually against a post, half listening, half drifting. He laughs at the wrong moments, misses the important ones, but he doesn't leave. That counts for something. Later, in the quiet of the church, Kennedy sits at the piano. Her fingers move slowly across the keys, producing a melody that feels older than the building itself. A few women sit nearby, listening, speaking softly among themselves when the music pauses. They come to her for guidance, for comfort, for something they cannot quite name. Kennedy listens, nods, speaks gently, but her eyes never quite match her voice. That afternoon, a dispute breaks out. Nothing serious. Two men arguing over land that had not belonged to either of them before the bad time, and does not clearly belong to either of them now. Voices rise, hands gesture. The line between disagreement and something worse begins to blur. Discipline with control. The sentries arrive quickly, not forcefully, but firmly. Caleb steps between them. Zion stands just behind. Enough. The word lands and holds. Later, the men sit before Judge Burns. The conversation is quieter now, measured. There are no fines, no prison, no written law, only judgment and expectation. You'll both work the south field this week, Judge Burns says. Together, and you'll settle it there. They don't argue. Because in Allen, that is enough. As evening falls, the town gathers again. Meals shared, stories told, children playing in the fading light. It feels normal. But as the sun dips behind the mountains, the sentries return to their posts. The roads are watched, the tree lines observed, the silence beyond the valley listened to. Because Allen is not safe, it is protected. And those are not the same thing. That night, Ethan Jr. stands at the eastern road, looking out into the darkness beyond the rugged Vermont mountains. Old Ethan joins him after a while, saying nothing at first. "You ever think about what's out there?" Ethan Jr. asks. Old Ethan doesn't answer right away. Instead, he watches the horizon, the place where the road disappears. Every day. And old Ethan exhales slowly. "I think," he stops. Then, quietly, "I think we've been very lucky." The wind moves through the trees, soft, almost gentle. From somewhere far beyond the mountains, a sound carries, faint, unfamiliar, not wind, not water, something else. Ethan Jr. hears it, looks out into the darkness, but whatever it was, it doesn't come again. Somewhere, out there in the darkness, the wreckage of an ancient airliner has exploded in a small, contained forest fire. Behind them, the lights of Allen glow softly against the night, warm, steady, held together by people who have learned exactly how fragile that warmth really is. Winter loosens its grip just enough to be noticed as the river swells and breaks apart the last stubborn sheets of ice, sending them drifting downstream in slow, grinding silence. At the edge of that river, near the skeletal remains of a long abandoned structure, stands old Ethan, his eyes fixed on something only he fully understands, a quiet intensity behind them that has nothing to do with the present moment. Beside him is Ethan Jr., steady and grounded, watching not the river, but his father. Nearby, Caleb and Zion stand together, their presence solid and alert, while Juan checks the straps on a saddle with practiced care. A short distance away, Mason and Joshua prepare their gear. No longer boys, not quite men, stepping into something that will shape who they become, and leaning casually against a warped support beam, as if none of this requires urgency, is Tony, watching everything, listening, remembering, more than he lets on. Behind them rises the broken shell of the Winooski Motel, half collapsed, partially claimed by the river, its exposed rooms held together by makeshift supports, tarps, and time. Inside those ruined walls, something has been built, not for shelter, but for understanding. The Winooski Motel should have fallen years ago. Half of it already has. The rest remains standing only because someone refused to let it go. Inside, the air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and river water. Sunlight filters through a single intact window, stretching long across the floor and climbing the far wall. That wall is not empty. It is covered, painted, marked, changed over time. Old Ethan stands before it, motionless, waiting. A rough map of northern Vermont spreads across the surface, hand-drawn, imperfect, layered with years of additions and corrections. Circles mark known airports: Burlington, Montpelier, Rutland. Lines stretch between them, connecting routes to places far beyond the edge of the map: New York, Boston, Chicago, Montreal, and, scattered across those lines, red marks. Some are circles, some are X's, some are nothing more than scratches, notes, bits of cloth nailed into the wood beside uncertain guesses. Each one means the same thing. Something came down here. Behind him, the others gather, not in a hurry, not speaking loudly. They've seen this before, many times, but old Ethan still studies it like it might change. It was around 11, he says quietly. No one interrupts. The night, everything stopped. He doesn't turn around. No lights, no engines, no sound. Nothing worked. Zion exhales softly. We've heard this one. Old Ethan nods once. I know, but he continues anyway. There are always planes in the sky, he says. Hundreds, thousands. His hand lifts slowly, tracing one of the lines on the wall. They don't just fly anywhere. They follow paths. To and from these places. He taps one of the circles, then another. And on that night, his hand pauses. They didn't land. Silence settles over the room. They fell. No one argues, because no one needs to. Juan shifts slightly. What do we do with the bodies? The question hangs there, heavy, unavoidable. No one answers right away, because they already know. Later, they agree. Graves, markers, respect. Even now, especially now. Outside, the horses are prepared. The gear is packed. They call them scavenger hunts. It sounds harmless, almost playful. It isn't. The rides happen only during the thaw, when the river runs high, when the land softens, when something buried might reveal itself, and when the smell of old things begins to rise. They move out in a quiet line, following paths that are no longer roads, guided by memory, instinct, and the marks on a wall that only one man fully understands. Mason and Joshua ride near the middle, listening more than speaking, watching everything, learning. Tony lags slightly behind, as if unconcerned with the urgency of the moment, but his eyes never stop moving. Caleb and Zion ride forward, scanning the terrain, reading it the way some men read books. Ethan Jr. stays close to old Ethan, not to guide him, but to understand him. They don't expect to find anything, not really, but they never return empty-handed. Days later, back in Allen, strange things begin to appear. Clothing that doesn't match anything anyone remembers. Tools with unfamiliar designs. Small luxuries, oddities. Tony sells some of it. Meg redistributes the rest quietly through the sewing circle, where nothing is ever questioned too closely. Found it at the farm, she tells them. No one presses her, because everyone understands. Some truths are better softened. In the evenings, old Ethan returns to the wall, alone. He sits sometimes, watching it, waiting for something, an idea, a connection, a memory to settle into place. Behind him, the motel creaks softly in the shifting air. The river moves below, and somewhere far beyond the valley, beyond the reach of their maps, beyond the lines drawn by memory and guesswork, the sky still holds its secrets, secrets that did not end when the world did. And slowly, patiently, old Ethan begins to understand that the ground beneath them is not random, and that something, somewhere, is still waiting to be found. A low stretch of land rests quietly between two rising hills, the grass long and undisturbed, bending gently in the wind, as if nothing has touched it in years. Along the edge of that valley, where the trees begin to thin and the ground slopes downward, stands Ethan Jr., his posture still, his gaze fixed on something just beyond the rise. Beside him is old Ethan, older now than most men are meant to be, his expression distant, as if he has already arrived at a conclusion the others have yet to reach. Nearby, Caleb and Zion stand in silence, their attention focused, their instincts unsettled by something they cannot yet see. One moves slowly along the tree line, scanning the ground with deliberate care, while Mason and Joshua stand just behind, drawn forward by curiosity and held back by something they cannot name. A few steps apart, Tony watches them all, his easy confidence gone, replaced by something quieter, something more cautious. Beyond the rise, the earth has been disturbed. They see the trees first, not broken, not scattered, cut, a long, unnatural path carved through the hillside, where thick trunks have been sheared at angles, too clean, too precise, too violent to be anything but impact. The men stop without speaking. No one needs to say it. Something came through here, fast, low, and out of control. They follow the damaged trees, slowly, carefully. The ground softens as they descend into the valley. The earth gives way beneath their boots, the air carrying a faint scent that does not belong to the forest. Metal, burnt, but old. At the bottom of the ravine, the forest begins to clear, and there it is, ancient debris rotting among the vegetation, cracked open, overgrown and rusty, the remains of a massive aircraft. Not shattered, not scattered, mostly intact. For a long moment, no one moves, because this is not like the others. This is not debris. This is a place. Tony exhales slowly. Well, no one laughs. They approach carefully. The outer doors hang open, warped but accessible. Inside, darkness. Juan steps forward first, ducking beneath the bent frame, disappearing into the shadow. A few seconds pass, then it's clear. One by one, they enter. The air inside is still, dry, preserved. Rows of seats stretch out before them, many intact, some displaced, all frozen in a moment that never finished. Overhead compartments hang open, some closed, some forced, and scattered throughout the aisle. Luggage, not torn apart, not looted. Waiting. Mason reaches down slowly, lifting a bag. It is heavier than he expects. He opens it. Clothing, clean, folded, like it was packed yesterday. Joshua opens another, more of the same. Zion crouches near a seat, picking up a small case. Inside, toiletries, soap, toothpaste. He pauses. Look at this. Tony moves further down the aisle. He finds something else, a pouch. He opens it. Gold, jewelry, watches. He lets out a quiet breath. Ethan Jr. doesn't look at the gold. He looks at the seats, at the empty space where people once were, and at the things they left behind, because whatever happened here, it didn't give them time. Further back, old Ethan stands still, his hand resting lightly against the interior wall of the aircraft, not exploring, remembering. This one was trying to land, he says softly. They all turn toward him. He gestures toward the angle of the fuselage, the position of the wing, the slope of the valley. It wasn't falling straight down. It was controlled. That lands differently, because it means someone was flying, trying. Outside, the wind moves through the broken hillside. Inside, the silence deepens. Eventually, they begin to work, carefully, methodically, as the rotted airframe begins to shift and fall apart. They remove what they can carry: bags, clothing, small valuables. Everything is stacked just outside the aircraft in neat rows, not out of greed, out of necessity. There's too much, Mason says quietly. Ethan Jr. nods. We'll be back. They all know they will. They don't speak much on the ride back. Each man carries something, but not just in their packs. That night, in the motel, they lay everything out. Tony sets his finds on the table, gold catching the dim light. Zion places his beside it. Soap, toothpaste. Tony glances at him, raises an eyebrow. Zion doesn't react. These matter more, he says simply. Ethan Jr. places his items last. Tampons, cosmetics, pregnancy tests, lipstick. Small, overlooked, important things. No one laughs, because they understand. These are not luxuries anymore. These are survival. Old Ethan watches all of it quietly, then turns back to the wall. He studies the lines again, the circles, the marks, and slowly, carefully, he adds a new one, a red X. As each map is updated, the lines make more sense. There is no uncertainty in his expression, because now he knows this wasn't the only one, and somewhere out there, there are more, waiting to be found. Late autumn settles over the valley, the green of summer giving way to gold and brown, the air thinner now, edged with the promise of cold. At the January farm, where the land has been carved and reshaped by months of relentless work, stands Ethan Jr., his boots planted firmly in soil, that no longer resembles what it once was. Beside him, old Ethan watches the same ground, though his attention is fixed not on the work itself, but on the patterns that led them here. Nearby, Mason and Joshua move through a growing network of wagon paths and the decaying railroad track under repair, directing others with quiet confidence, their place in this new world no longer uncertain. At the edge of the clearing, Caleb and Zion stand together, their eyes moving between the workers and the distant tree lines beyond. Juan tightens the rigging on a reinforced wagon, built not for harvest, but for weight. And a few paces back, Tony stands with his hands resting loosely at his sides, watching it all unfold with a look that is no longer casual. Behind them, stacked, lined, and carefully covered, are containers, barrels, tanks, metal and plastic vessels of every kind, more than anyone expected. It didn't happen all at once. It couldn't have. By the time the leaves began to turn, old Ethan's wall was no longer a theory. It was a record. 7 red X's, each one marked, confirmed, visited, each one a place where something had fallen out of the sky and stayed there, intact. They didn't talk about it in town, not in full. Instead, the story stayed simple. Scavenger hunts, a phrase repeated often enough to become truth. But the work behind it was anything but simple. The fuel came first in small amounts. What could be carried, what could be dragged, what could be poured into whatever container they had on hand. Barrels, cans, old tanks, pulled from vehicles that would never run again. At first, it was manageable. Then, it wasn't. The terrain fought them. Soft ground, steep inclines, paths that were never meant to carry that kind of weight. More than once, they lost entire loads to tipped wagons and broken axles. More than once, they nearly lost people. But they didn't stop, because with each trip, the reality became clearer. They had something no one else had, and if they were careful, something no one else even knew existed. The wagons changed first, reinforced, widened, stabilized for terrain that shifted under pressure. Then the paths, cleared, flattened, redirected. Not roads, but something closer. And finally, the idea that had been forming quietly for months began to take shape, not to reach the wrecks, but to pass them, to connect something larger, the railroad. At the January farm, the work took on a new urgency. What had once been a clearing project became something organized, structured, a system. Short sections of rail began to appear, laid carefully across the most stable stretches of land. Not continuous, not complete, but enough to change what was possible. Mason and Joshua found themselves at the center of it, their experience with the CVRR no longer theoretical. They understood weight, balance, movement. They understood how things traveled. Bruce visited often now, bringing knowledge, advice, the occasional piece of salvaged equipment, and wagon loads of found steel rail that made the impossible feel just slightly more within reach. "You're not building a line," he told them once. He looked out, across the uneven rails, the wagons, the workers. "You're building a reason for one." That stayed with them, because it was true. The jet fuel wasn't just fuel, it was leverage. Back in Allen, the changes were quieter, but deeper. Clothing that didn't wear out, tools that didn't break, materials that could be repaired instead of replaced. Meg's sewing circle became something more than a place for mending. It became distribution, quiet, careful, Lives improved in ways that were hard to trace back to any single source. And in some cases, lives were saved. Illness treated with supplies that shouldn't exist anymore. Injuries managed with tools no one had seen in years. No one asked too many questions because no one wanted the answers to be taken away. At the motel, the wall continued to grow. More markings, more notes, more certainty. Old Ethan stood before it often now, no longer searching, but confirming. They were all along the routes, he said one evening. The others gathered behind him. Coming in, going out, he traced the lines again, and we're right in the middle of it. So what you're saying is, we're sitting on the middle of the sky. No one corrected him, because that's exactly what it felt like. Later, outside the library, Zion sat with another book in his hands. Same look, same tension. Caleb joined him again. You still don't like it? Zion shook his head. I don't trust it. He closed the book. They're writing it like it was always going this way. Caleb leaned back slightly. Maybe they need it to. Zion looked out across the town. Yeah, that's what worries me. Across the square, Holly moved more slowly now, one hand resting instinctively against her stomach. It was no longer something that could be missed. Bobby worked nearby, actually working this time. Not pretending, not drifting. He didn't look at her often, but when he did, it was different. Back at the farm, under a sky that darkened earlier each day, Ethan Jr. and old Ethan stood near the edge of the growing line. Behind them, the containers sat in quiet rows, too many to count at a glance, too much to ignore. You think anyone else knows? Ethan Jr. asked. Old Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked out past the trees, past the valley. No, he said finally. Not yet. The wind moved through the clearing, cold now, persistent. And if they do? Ethan Jr. asked. Old Ethan's expression didn't change. They will. They always do. In the distance, far beyond the reach of the valley, something shifted. Not seen, not heard clearly, but felt, like the world itself was beginning to take notice.